Hi everybody, welcome back to Firebase Semi-live. So in our last episode, we pushed everything up to the cloud. So we're actually looking at our real Cloud Firestore database. And we changed our favorites button so it switches back and forth between view my favorites and close up my favorites every time. Neat. All right, right now we are still hard coding in our favorites data, and I would like to stop doing that. And so let's go ahead and add some buttons to add and remove a restaurant from our favorites array. So first thing we're going to do, I have to make sure that I remove this bit of hard coding in here where I actually sort of overwrite my favorites array. Otherwise, every time I run this thing, it's going to keep showing it. It's going to look like my functions aren't working. So let's do that. And gee, you know what? Let's go into our Firebase console here. And let's just make sure under our database, our users, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and remove this favorites array as well so that we don't have sort of these. Actually, you know what? It's OK, because these are real restaurants. We'll kind of get to see what it looks like with them loaded, and we can add more to them later. So you know what? I'm going to keep them. Sure, they were set through hard coding, but you know, they're still around and they're still usable. Let's start by adding an ugly button. And I'll be honest, it's going to probably remain ugly for most of this lesson because I am not a graphic designer. You know, programmer art is about the top level of what I can do. But, you know, we'll have something that works. And then, you know, you can go and take it to your local artist and be like, please make this look pretty. So let's see here. Let's look for within. So what we're going to do here is when we view like the details of a restaurant, right, in our sort of restaurant details page, I basically kind of want to add a button here that either says like add or remove depending on the state of this button and if it is in our favorites. Let's see here. Where's the template? Oh, here's our restaurant header. And it looks like there's our name, there's our price. Yeah, OK, then underneath we got ratings and details. So I think probably right here, let's add a button. We'll call it like add to favorites. And it'll be a class of MDC button. Remember, MDC is that material design components that makes it super easy to like, gee, will this even work? Hey, look at that. All right, we already got like the start of a button, right? It's in there, and it even kind of, you can kind of see it like changes based on rollover and click state. All that just by saying class equals MDC button. Nice. But this button needs some content, so let's add in a little span. And I believe this is MDC button, material design components button, double underscore label. I get confused between all the dashes and underscores, but they probably make sense if you've worked with this library before. I'll add in a little label called add, and you know what? Let's add a material icons, MDC button, double underscore icon of favorite. And if you're wondering, how did I know that I need this class of material icons and MDC button icon? I looked it up on Google. But my guess is, again, if you're sort of familiar with this library, this all makes complete sense. But here, let's reload. OK, now we have the add label and that heart icon, which is basically what this thing does. Is, yay, now I have a button that says add to favorites. Awesome, but doesn't do anything. Well, we should fix that, huh? Within my, let me go into my friendlyeats.data function, because this is sort of where we're doing all of our functions that actually talk to the database. Let's add this function to add to favorites. So let's see, friendlyeats.prototype, add to favorites. And this is going to be like a function that's going to take in a restaurant ID. And then we should have this do something. This is kind of a neat thing. A while back, Cloud Firestore added the ability for you to sort of seamlessly add and remove elements to arrays. It used to be if you had to do this, you sort of had to have a transaction where you were going to like read in the array and then sort of append an element to it and then sort of write the array all in the same transaction. It was a bit of a hassle for what was essentially just like adding and removing to an array. So they sort of added this new functionality that kind of just lets you say, hey, add this value to an array if it doesn't already exist. it's a little bit of set functionality, but you're doing it to an array. And it's pretty neat. I'm going to do that here. Let's see. I guess the first thing we need to do is get our user ID so we know what document we're adding this favorites list to. Here, current user ID. You know, it's bothering me. Hold on. Let me have, I think in general, we've been saying capital I under lowercase d. So let's kind of do that everywhere. Just keep our abbreviations or our capitalization consistent. All right, so Firebase auth current user dot ID. And so then our user doc is going to be Firebase Firestore collection users, and then our document current user ID. And so if we go back to our console here, that's basically pointing to users / current user ID. Let's see here. You know, let's just make sure that I'm going to do a little console logging. Adding restaurant ID to your favorites. I always like doing a little logging just to make sure that a function I think that I should be calling is actually being called. And then in our user doc, we're going to call update. And within the update, this is where we sort of have our little bit of special functionality for dealing with arrays. We're going to call favorites. This favorites value is going to be firebase.firestore.fieldValue arrayUnion restaurant ID. There you go. So yeah, this is the little bit of special functionality that says, hey, you know, don't just set the value to this, but go ahead and perform an arrayUnion on it. So if this restaurant ID value does not exist within this array, go ahead and add it. Let's go ahead and, whoops, I don't need to reload here. Let's go ahead and reload here. And, oh, well, nothing's happened because I haven't hooked up the button yet. I guess let's do that. Here, what we'll do is within our button, can you do it within our button? Let's see, data for click equals add to favorites. Again, sort of using our rendering engine, what this will do is it will kind of, when it finds this button, it will go ahead and sort of hook up this add to favorites function to this button. But I need to pass that in. So this probably makes sense, make a little more sense if I go into our, not our view setup, boop, not our init review dialog, not our init filter dialog, not this, but our view restaurant function. So you can see here in our data now that we're going to pass in to our render function, we're saying, hey, you know what, when we see show add review, that's going to call this dialog.show. I'm now going to say, let me just make sure this is the right place. Yeah. Data add to favorites equals function that add to favorites ID. So there we go. So I think this should be all we need to basically kind of pass this function, add to favorites, passing along a restaurant ID when we are viewing that restaurant details page. And yes, I probably could have done this with another, basically kind of what I did up here, you know, add event listener click. But I think this is actually kind of the more modern way of doing it, which is sort of having our rendering engine actually deal with sort of what gets, yeah, kind of what gets called when a button gets clicked. So, you know what, let me just kind of reload this all and make sure this works though. All right, so here's drive through spot. I'm going to go ahead and click add. And I'm getting an error. Function collection reference.doc requires its first argument to be a pipe non-empty string, but it was undefined. All right, so what does that mean? Let's take a look and see. I actually don't know. Let's see here. Let's go ahead and insert a little breakpoint and see what happens if I add this now. So let's see, our current user ID is undefined. Oh, well, I guess that would be the problem. I wonder why. Let's look at Firebase.auth, current user. I seem to have a current user. And it looks like, it's a UID. What's in my code? .id. Well, there you go. There's my problem. All right. I'll change that to current user.userid, and now I should actually have a real user document. Okay. Let's try this one more time. Drive through spot. Here, let me open up my console again. See if this works. Click add. I guess I don't need the breakpoint anymore. Let's keep going. And in my console, it now says, OK, I'm going to add this to your favorites. I wonder if it really did. Let's go ahead and look at our database. Oh, look, it did. It went ahead and added it to our list of favorites. Let's go ahead and add one more. Let's add Firebar. It's got a great name. I'm going to add it to my favorites. And now let's go ahead and look at our favorites. And we have 4 restaurants. Pretty good. So we now have officially added the button that adds an item to our list of favorites. The problem, of course, is that we now need this button to go from add to remove depending on if this is in our list of favorites or not. And well, I guess we can add that logic next. How are we doing on time?
We're at 10 minutes.
10 minutes, perfect. We can go ahead and remove the item from our favorites too. But I need to kind of conditionally change the state of this button depending on if this restaurant is in our list of favorites or not. So let's see here. Let me go into Friendly Eats here, and I don't know if this is the right way to do this, but let's kind of add a little globally variable here called this user favorites equals an array. There's probably smarter ways of doing this, but again, for the purpose of this video, I'm just going to put everything in an array and kind of make it a global variable, or at least a class level variable, and that'll work. Under our update user info function, let's see. I think we're going to have to change this a little bit. Yeah, we're setting our user data. We're also going to need to kind of fetch our user data as well. And to do both of those, I think we're going to need to capture them both in promises. Let's see here. So this thing here, I'm going to capture in a update promise. And then I'm going to create another promise. Call it a get promise. That is Firebase Firestore doc user / user ID .get. And after that then, and this is going to be a function that's going to have a document variable. I'm going to say in here, let's see, var user data equals doc.data. Sorry, I'm using constants everywhere. I should probably use constant here. I noticed that some of our files in here like to use consts and others like to use vars. I don't know why they changed that from one file to the next, or if that was an intentional thing or just kind of how stuff happened. It does look like, at least in this file, they seem to like using consts a lot more. Or wait, maybe that's just me. Is that just me that added these 3 functions and everywhere else they're still using vars? Oh no, they got them here. All right, so I don't know. Apparently in this file, we like using consts. So I'm going to keep doing that. So here's our constant data. If our user data.favorites exists, well, then let's go ahead and set that. And otherwise, and let's log it too. Always good for debugging to see what's going on, what we think the state of our world is. And then, because we now have these 2 promises that we sort of want to make sure both get resolved before moving on, I'm going to return promise.all, and in here I'm just going to pass an array of these 2 values, update promise and get promise. All right, let's go ahead and reload this page. Look at that, I got a favorites array. Fantastic. Isn't that beautiful? That's some beautiful code. And so actually, I think if we go into our index.html, I'm going to kind of do the same logic as before. We're going to have an add to favorites and a remove from favorites. So here, this second one, we'll say it's remove. And I guess the data for a click will be removed from favorites. And let's see. Well, here, does that, we got our 2 buttons now? All right, we got our 2 buttons. Ugly, but let's keep going. All right, I'm just going to try and see, can I just add my data for if directly in here? So let's try this. I have no idea if this is going to work. Data for if not equals, and I'm going to need to pass in like a variable of like is favorite. And data for if. All right, will that actually work if I just put it within the button and not wrap the button around a span? Looks like it. OK, basically same logic as before. Like I'm going to, when I sort of render this restaurant header, I'm going to pass in within my data an argument, or yeah, a value of is favorite. And then basically it will either render this button if favorites is false, which is the add to favorite button, or this button if favorites is true, which is the remove from favorites button. And well, I guess I probably need to go ahead and render that, or add that to my data somewhere. So up here, you can see I have my section header, and it looks like I'm rendering the template. And here's the data. So I think I really just need to, let's say, if that dot user favorites dot index of ID is greater than or equal to 0. Data is favorite. So I'm going to add on this is favorite value equals true. Else, it's false. Whoa. And if you're like, why aren't you just using the ternary operator? We could do that too. This gets a little messy. Or you can even just say data is favorite equals this, right? If you prefer more concise code, I guess this is probably the thing you want, which basically says, data is favorite equals, does this ID exist in our user favorites array? Actually, I don't know. This is a little less readable, but probably if, I don't know. It's your call. More concise code versus a little more time to actually figure out what this is doing. Or, probably the right thing is put this in another variable or another function. But you know what? This is good. We'll keep this as it is. So let's go ahead and reload this. All right, now it looks like I have a remove. Awesome. So here, let me go ahead and go into like grill best. I don't think this is in our favorites. I'm going to hit add. It says it's adding it to our favorites. I'm going to reload the page. And now it has a remove. And I click on it and it does nothing. And that's because I haven't hooked this up to a function yet. So let's do that next. So let me jump down here. And actually, remove from favorites is very, very similar to add to favorites. We'll get our user ID. Here's our user doc. We'll say removing from our favorites. And then I believe it is, should we just jump into the documentation and see? Cloud Firestore arrays. Adding data. Update elements in array. Array remove. OK. That's the function we want. All right. And then I just need to make sure that I hook that up to, so we have our data add to favorites, which calls add to favorites, and our data remove from favorites. All right, so basically, just to, in case I wasn't really explaining what I was doing all that well, I've created this function called remove from favorites, which just calls arrayRemove instead of arrayUnion to remove a value from an array if it exists. And then I've basically said, OK, that's going to be the function that gets called if you click on this remove from favorites button, which you can see here has been defined here. So data for click equals remove from favorites. So now I think all that's been saved. Let me go ahead and reload this one more time. All right, so this item, this restaurant is in my favorites. I'm going to click remove. Hang on, it's saying that's not a function. Let me just reload, make sure I didn't do something completely wrong here. Let me find, here's grill spot, add it. That seems to work. Let me reload. I'm going to hit remove. Oh, that get deep item is not a function. What did I do wrong here? Let's see. Probably, I'll update you later. Probably this remove from favorites I must have misspelled. Let's see. Yeah, I said remote from favorites instead of remove. You probably don't need to worry too much about this kind of debugging unless you happen to be using our specific homegrown rendering, JavaScript rendering engine, which you're probably not. So let me click remove. The console is now telling me that it's removed that list from our favorites. And if I reload this page, that now says add. So I now have a button that will either add an item to my favorites or remove it from our favorites, depending on the state of the button. So let me remove drive-through best here. Let me remove that. And if I go back to our favorites, I can see it's gone. That's awesome. And let's go ahead and add Spot Prime. That looks like a really good one. I'm going to add that to our list of favorites. And cool. Our button basically works, sort of. You can see there's definitely some wonkiness here and there. For starters, I basically have to kind of reload every time to refresh my favorites array. And so that's probably something that we can tackle in the next video. What time are we at?
20 minutes.
All right, 20 minutes. Look at that. Great timing. So we have the ability to add an item to our favorites and remove it to our favorites. We have this button that changes state, or it's actually two different buttons, and it calls these functions that go ahead and add remove this thing from our favorites array. Next up, let's make this update so I don't have to keep reloading my page every time I do that. So I will see you soon in the next video. Thanks, everyone.